Hello there for you folks. The last couple of days you've been messing around with something called the RestallFish package, and I just wanted to point out a few things. I've got my tank engine in front of me here, and you've probably realized that this is kind of where the program is being run, and the my fish and my tank um, programs, classes, as we know now, are just essentially data types. So a few things I wanted to mention here is this idea of public versus private. And down in my tank engine, uh, we saw here, um, and I'll talk about this later, but when I'm printing off, I want to, here is where I printed off all my output, but I wanted to say, well, instead of just printing out a certain color fish is swimming or not swimming, and that's what the output ended up being, is I want to include the type, right? Because if I look in my fish class, there's a type, and I actually changed that. Did you see that? So I made every fish a clownfish, right? And since this was an attribute that had a certain value, all the fish would be clownfish. And notice that's why all the fish were always swimming, right? So when that was equal to true, when the fish were constructed, they were all swimming. Just like now, all of them are going to be clownfish. All of them are going to be clownfish. So back in my tank engine, I want to print out, instead of just a yellow, furred the yellow fish is swimming, I want it to say furred the yellow clownfish is swimming. And and I've got access to it because uh, this is printing off type, which we just saw in my fish is an attribute. So this should be fine, but it's not. It's giving me an error. So I want to show you what it says. It says the field my fish.type is not visible. It's not visible, and it says change the visibility of type to default. Well, what that's saying is one of the fixes I could make is change this to default, or I could change it to public. And as soon as I change that to public, then that works. That'll work. And when I run this, um, it'll actually work. And Eclipse is nice that it'll tell you whether you're going to get a runtime or syntax error. But we don't like having public variables, public attributes, because that kind of um, sort of action breaks the rule of encapsulation. The idea of encapsulation is that the data itself, which are the attributes, is and the methods, the actions that behave on those attributes are encapsulated in one thing, and we can only access or change the values of these things through the methods, right? So we have private attributes, but public methods that access them. Um, and so we also met then um, the idea of getters and setters. Getter is an accessor method, setters the mutator method, and so it says, well, one of the fixes back in that Eclipse does say, and probably is this going to change back to broken? Should change back to broken here, I think, because it is broken. Yeah, I changed it back to private, so I bet you this will be broken again now in tank engine. Yep, see, broken again. So the first fix was to change the visibility of type to default, and then the second one you see, create getter and setter. So if I just click on that, it would create the getter and setter methods for that, get type and set type. And then it asked me where I'd like to set it, so I could add those. And back in my fish, there they are, getters and setters. Just no, hang on, where are they? Get type and set type. There they are. And so that would be a fix that I could use get type there, and then if I run that, it's going to work. It's going to work. Dangers. What's the danger of that? You say, well, if you have getters and setters for everything, then why don't you just make the attributes public? It's not really encapsulated if you're going to let everybody change them anyway. And that's a good point, but um, often in Java, this is the way we do it. We don't want the data to be accessed directly, but we'll allow it to be accessed through the getters and setters. All right, fantastic. So that's going to work. Object and method chaining. This is the next thing I want to mention because quite quickly, our code through object-oriented programming correctly, it gets complicated. So how does this work? Like what's going on here? How has this got the value of clownfish? Well, we know that to access any of our methods, we need an object. Well, what's the object here? Right there, room 144. Well, what was room 144? Room 144 was a tank, right? And so tank, as we know, didn't have a type. But what did it have? It had a length, a width, a height, and it also had a array of fish, up to 12 fish. So this next thing here, because it's an array in the tank engine, this thing here, it says get fish I. Get fish I, so that get fish must be a method that's acting on this tank. Well, let's have a look. Let's see get fish. Oh, there's a set fish. Oh, there's a get fish. And so then it's going to return what? Oh, it's going to return a fish back to the tank engine. So that means this part here is actually the ith fish in the tank. So those two things together chain together and return a fish. Then the highlighted part that I have, then I've got a method called getColor. So because now I'm talking about a fish, not the tank, then it looks up, okay, in my fish, do I have a method called getColor? GetColor, yeah, there it is right there, and it just returns that color for us to print it out. This is the idea of method chaining. So again, in this one, it went from a tank to a fish, and then read a method of a fish. Okay, and that's how we read this code. So when you see dot 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 dot, it's just chaining objects and methods together. The last thing we're going to talk about, object construction. We saw here, we made the object my tank, and when we made my tank, that means it had all of these attributes, and it meant that we could access, once we made a my tank object, that we could access all the my tank methods. Okay, so we did that, we made that, and then what happened? Well, then we started making fish. Those were objects as well, and each time we make one of these objects, it's called an instance of that class. An object, it's called instantiation. So what was the going on here? Well, we were making all these dummy fish, and then right, where was it? Where was it? Where was it? This was setting the name, and this was setting the color of the fish. And right there, the set fish, this actually used the counter of the for loop and dumped that dummy fish into the tank in place I. Right? So that actually made this right here was setting that fish. The object was made up here, but then it was assigning it to the earlier object right there. Okay, dandy. Now, one of the tasks that you were asked to do, and this was kind of my real point here, one of the tasks you were asked to do was to decide how to make it so that some of the fish were swimming and not swimming. And probably you added code in your engine to do that. right? Just like we added code here to decide whether a fish was yellow or sprinkled colored or see-through colored, we could decide whether it was swimming or not swimming. And you probably were successful in doing that. Now, I want to mention that one way we could, that's different, is say we wanted in our object construction, when we instantiated it, to decide whether it was swimming or not randomly. Well, this is the sort of thing that we would do in a constructor. I have added this code. This is brand new code. You don't have this. So the public with no word class and then my fish, and we've seen some that have had some parameters in there, but we'll talk about that later. Don't worry. This code will be run when a new my fish object is made. So now this makes a random generator, which we've had some practice with, and then assigns to whatever fish called it is swimming is the next Boolean. So it'll randomly assign whether it's swimming or not right there. So another cool thing that we could do if we wanted to, we could assign those random names and random colors in the constructor instead of in the engine, right? And that way, that randomness code is in the class and not in the actual program. So we could have added that code in there. I'm going to run this just so you can see the whether that worked or not. Okay, Ferd the sprinkles clownfish is not swimming. Durf the blue clownfish is not swimming. Everybody is not. Oh no, there's one that is swimming. I run it again, and I'll get a whole new set of, well, clownfish, which I guess isn't that interesting. But I suppose I could add code to my constructor that randomly assigns a fish name as well. Okay, that's maybe more than I wanted to say for a warm-up. You don't necessarily have to take those notes, but don't be afraid to take the notes if you wanted to. And then back to your fish code, your gunfight code, and your mark book code.